I'm John.
I'm Jeff.
And welcome to Love and Other Investments. And in this episode, I'm going to be asking Jeff some questions about, quite frankly, about our podcast. I had a friend.
About our podcast?
About our podcast. I had a friend ask me the other day after listening to several of our episodes. He said, so I kind of see what you're not doing.
Which is an interesting comment.
Which I thought was a fascinating comment.
Right.
And I think I know him well enough to kind of know what he's saying. And I think what he was trying to tell me is, where's the quick recipe? Where's the quick, simple answers for how to budget or how to not argue or, how to stay away from these simple traps? I mean...
Yeah, you've known me a long time.
I have.
What do you think my opinion is about quick, simple answers?
Well, since I've known you long enough, I know that whenever I think I know what you're going to say, you give me a look, and then I go, oh, I shouldn't have done that. And then now you're baiting me to do it, which I think is fascinating.
Just messing with you.
So, what was your question?
It doesn't matter. No, I think, you know what, in the profession I am in, I don't have the inkling or the will to try to give answers. I know that it's like maybe it's a stereotype, like go to a therapist and get some advice. And in some ways, I'm sure people think that's just logical. Like, of course, if you have a problem, someone's going to go tell you what the answer is, right? But
Yep.
But I don't do that. I mean, there might be some exceptions to the rule, but generally, as a rule of thumb, I do not give advice to people. And
you do that because you want to frustrate them greatly, right?
I'm sure they do feel frustrated sometimes. Yeah, and there's probably more than one time they've told me that too. But no, it's not about frustration. It's about autonomy. I'm not really interested in handing people what I think is an answer to a problem because A, I don't know all the answers to all the problems. Mm-hmm. And B, even if I did, it doesn't really matter. The point is that they need to come to their own conclusions about what's right in their life for them. So oftentimes, sort of pulling it back to our podcast, oftentimes one of the things that occurs is that we have this tension between the parts of us, myself included, that says, hey, let's make an outline for what we're going to talk about and have the 5 bullet points that really describe the important things we need to communicate. And there's a part of me that's good with that and a part of me that's not. Mm-hmm. The part of me that's not says, I don't have the answers to all these problems that we talk about. I'm not saying I'm some kind of expert on everything everyone should do. And so, I think the bigger thing for us is to set up a process by which people can kind of jump into the process and work out the solutions for themselves.
So this brings me to a really interesting point, I think, is because, a lot of people have just heard you say, I don't have the answers. And so,
Right.
I don't know if we just lost half of our users, half of our
For
listeners.
sure.
They're
No
going,
doubt.
well, then why in the world would I waste my time listening to somebody who can't
Right.
who won't give me advice or can't give me answers?
Exactly.
I can go into the library, I can go to Barnes & Noble, and I can find 4 racks full of self-help books that give nothing but answers and advice.
Yeah.
Which I would say the fact that
Right.
there's 4 racks of books that give nothing but answers and advice and everybody still has problems might clue us in on something.
Proof's in the pudding there, isn't it? Yeah, why are not all of the problems of humanity cured, since we've certainly written about them over and over and over again?
And I want to go back to our origin story, and that is that, when you and I were doing Taekwondo together and getting to know each other a little bit, one of the things that I thought was fascinating that we both had in common was that we would talk to people about their issues that they were seeking to make progress on. And a lot of times they would leave feeling like they knew what they were going to do and were in agreement on what the right course was.
Right.
and they would leave, and then when we came back to check in, nothing had happened or the opposite had happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's something about our brains that just getting advice or even getting an answer or the right answer doesn't get it done.
Absolutely. I mean, if you've ever been in therapy before, you absolutely know the phenomenon of spending a really important hour with your therapist talking about the most meaningful things and then leaving the office and literally an hour or two later not remembering what you talked about. What a curious phenomenon that is, right? Like at the moment you think that was a great session and then you don't recall what it was about. Our minds are not, I've said this before, our minds are not singular. There are multiple motivations for why we do and don't do things. And there's a part of us that wants the status quo to be maintained. And if we do the things that are discussed in therapy or in financial planning or any other setting where some growth is trying to be supported, then we have to change. And we're constantly in a tension between the parts of us that want everything to stay the same, to stay stable, even if that stability is miserable.
Because it's familiar.
It's totally familiar. Or we can make a change and do something unfamiliar that's potentially painful, or we don't know what the outcome will be. So that unknown really gets in our heads. We get afraid of it.
Yeah, it's, sometimes people will say, and they don't say it quickly, but yes, I do want to get rid of this habit, or I do want to get over this hurt, but it's become such a part of me, I don't know what I would be if I didn't feel this way.
The place that I've heard that so many times is if I'm working with an artist or a musician or something like that, and they're depressed or anxious about something, they come in and they say, I want to not be depressed, but I think the only reason my music is so good is because I'm depressed.
Sure.
So there's a strong incentive, even though I think that's not true, but it's a strong internal incentive for them to not change so that they can hold on to something else that they value.
So one of the things that you love about me is my deep passion for analogies. And
That's true, though. That is true.
so I want to bring one in, and maybe we can play with it a little bit, because I think this one actually is something that people can kind of understand, and maybe it will help brighten the room a little bit. So there are basically, in the restaurant business, there's, in the kitchen, you have a chef. In a nice restaurant, you have a chef, and he's the executive chef. He's in charge of building the menu. He's been trained. That's a title you get after you get certifications, right?
Sure.
And then you have the line cooks or the sous chefs, the people who are actually building the meals for the shift, for table service.
Sure.
And they are not the ones who get to decide how spicy it's going to be. They are not the ones who get to decide what the entrees are going to be.
Sure.
They are taking a recipe and doing it like the chef would do it over and over and over. And
Yes.
their job is to
Repeat.
consistently reproduce somebody else's creative work.
Yes.
And I think of that like the self-help book or the self-help aisle is, people who have had some success and then try to hand that success down. They're really taking all of the creative work that maybe they've put into their life for 10, 20, 30, 40 years and trying to reduce it to a recipe. And
Yeah.
something is lost. Quite frankly, a lot is lost.
Yeah, sure.
So, you can do a recipe. You can do steps. But that doesn't mean that you have spent the time understanding the processes, getting into the ingredients, exploring which ingredients, at what time of year, under
Yeah.
what conditions.
Sure. What
All
heat
of
to
those-
apply, all that stuff.
Yes, and how to get that final output that you want. It's kind of one of those moments where you say the journey in that story to come to that recipe is far more valuable than just the recipe itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think at these times that we're telling people, hey, we are not here to hand you a recipe on how to improve your relationship, because two people are very complicated ingredients all amongst themselves.
Yes, for sure.
And you're going to have to get in there and explore who you are and who your spouse is, and run into these unexpected roadblocks and unexpected victories, and kind of fight for, and I mean this in a positive way, fight for the discovery
Yeah.
of what makes you guys you.
Right. And I think what I really like what you said. I like that analogy, and I think you said it well. And what I would add to it is that this endeavor is not just an intellectual one, and that's partly the reason why the self-help section in your local bookstore is not the cure for what ails us in life, because we can have information, we can have knowledge about something. Knowledge is not the equivalent of having a deep understanding of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, we use the diet analogy a lot. We all understand that if we want to lose weight, we've got to cut our calories. There's some complexity in this, of course, but the truth is there's other motivators in there. It's not that easy to know how to lose weight and then make it happen.
And keep it.
Right. And I would say that, for our work, one of the important ingredients, in addition to having some knowledge or intellectual understanding of it, is just the emotional component of it, right? When we talk about money in relationships, we're not talking just about the concrete dollar that we hold. We're talking about what the dollar means to us individually, right? We're talking about what the emotional impact of many, many dollars that have come and gone in our life have had on us. We're talking about the relationships that those dollars have passed through, and what impacts those dollars have had on our lives. Because money's just a resource, right?
Sure,
It's just like
sure.
any other resource. So it's not just that we have to know how to balance a checkbook or how to do the addition and subtraction that you've mentioned many times is pretty simple. Like, you don't really need to know calculus to figure out how to take care of most money things. You need to know other skills, right?
Right.
You have to have some other kind of intelligence going on. Maybe you want to call that emotional intelligence. I don't know. I'm not convinced that that's what the label should be, but it's something in that direction.
And I deal with this all the time when I'm doing planning engagements with clients. They're saying, so what should we do next? What's the next thing to do? Where should our money go? What should we be? They want a recipe.
Right.
And a lot of the planning software that we use is trying to, show a roadmap of where things are going to go, and then provide a recipe. If you'll do these 8 steps, if you'll put money into these 4 things,
Right.
then you'll get this output at the end. And again, it's the same thing, is yes, I could give that recipe to somebody, and yes, they could go down the road and possibly implement it, but we're back to, if I tell somebody what to eat, will they implement it? If I tell somebody how many workouts a week to do, will they implement it?
Sure.
The
Or
answer-
anything else.
Or anything else?
Yes.
And the answer is, in most cases, no.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with the quality of advice
Right.
that I'm giving.
Right.
So when my clients get frustrated because when I'm saying things that I've learned to say from you,
Yeah.
which is, well, what is it that you're really trying to accomplish here? And, oh, by the way, spouse who hasn't said anything in the last 40 minutes, what do you really want to take place?
Yeah.
And, is what we're currently doing with your resources feel like the right thing? Those are the types of discussions that really start this idea of, are we going to unpack who we want to be? And I know we get into this so much, and we keep doing it over and over again. And quite honestly, we do it 100 more times.
We will do it 100 more times. For
And
sure.
Maybe it'll take 40 more for somebody to get it. But even after they get it, realizing that is the struggle, is to keep drilling down, to keep questioning, to keep being curious about what's important to me and what's important to my spouse, and what's going to be unique about this life that we're going to build together. I just, I think it's important for us to be clear to people that we are not going to be headed towards giving you answers.
Yeah. Which is disappointing, right? It's
Yeah.
disappointing. We all have to overcome the reality of feeling disappointed, because all of us want to be able to go to the McDonald's drive-through, order the thing and have it pop out, 5 minutes later and enjoy that treat, right? We all want that.
But of course, it brings its own disappointment about 10 minutes later.
Yeah, right. and a
You're
belly
like,
and a belly full
Yeah.
later, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, we have to acknowledge our disappointment that the answers are not simple.
Life isn't easy. I mean, it's a cliche, right?
Yeah.
But I find it fascinating how we keep believing that if we could just turn the dials to the right numbers, it would get easy again. What was the Staples or whatever the office business company was that came up with the
easy
commercial
button
with
or
the
whatever.
easy button? And it really strikes an accord with people. I just want it to be easy. I look at other people's relationships and I go, look at how easy their relationship is. Jeff, is their relationship easy?
No.
It's not.
And really, when we think, all of us have, a sense of the truth that the things that are most worth doing are also the most difficult. I mean, I think most people would understand that. Like, if you've played an instrument or a sport, or if you've tried to accomplish a goal or whatever, something that's really hard to do, you have to put in blood, sweat, and tears, and then you get to that point. There's a certain satisfaction that is immeasurable by doing that work, whether you achieve that goal or not. You feel as if you spent all your energy and did your best.
I think it is amazing that you and I got to know each other through an experience of doing martial art that both of us had never done before.
I know.
Because that is the exact same. If any of our listeners have done any type of boxing or jiu-jitsu or any martial art practice or any sports practice for that matter, you start that first day not knowing how to do anything, and you just want to be told, what do I need to do? And you realize you can't do it.
Yeah.
And then after you've been doing it for years, you start having insights about, even when you thought you knew what you were doing, you really didn't know what you were doing.
Yeah, I remember Jason, the guy who teaches us. He told me one day, I think I was having a lesson with him. He told me one day, I want you to do this kick, and I want you to hit it pretty hard.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did. And then he said, yeah, but I want you to relax. And I was like, wait a minute, you just gave me the instruction to hit this thing hard, and now you're telling me to relax. How do those two things go together? And at that time, I thought it was probably a yellow belt, or the lowest
Right.
above white, right? The pretty
Right.
low on the totem pole. I had no idea what he was talking about. None
You
at
hadn't
all.
learned enough
No,
to,
I couldn't
to
do
know
it.
how those two things naturally actually fit together.
Yes, and it was
So-
a paradox, and I couldn't figure it out. And this is an example of what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
knowing is not the same thing as having some kind of deeper understanding.
So let's do everybody a favor today. We've told them that, unfortunately, the self-help book, while, maybe inspiring a few ideas here or there, isn't going to be where they find the answers to their life.
Right.
We've told them it's a lot of hard work, and we've told them it's going to take a long time.
Yeah.
That's all pretty depressing. So,
Yeah.
but it's like anything else. It's the work the work is actually a blessing.
Yeah.
Going through it
yeah.
is because then you feel like you're doing the real thing. You're not just putting Band-Aids on it. You've actually started towards
something
a
real.
destination that makes
Yeah,
sense.
Right.
So let's give them a few simple ideas about how to get into the beginning.
Sure.
I want to start with, we say this a lot, but having conversations about, we did a podcast on date night.
Yeah.
And, I've actually had people tell me, yeah, we tried date night for a while, but, we're together all week. And so going out on a date, we didn't have anything to talk about because I already know what happened all week.
Oh my
And I
gosh.
just about fell out of my chair.
I know.
I'm like, no,
Yeah.
that's no. So, we talk a lot about talking about our past.
Right.
Just sharing stories about when you were a kid, sharing stories about when you were in high school. You know, were you excited about your time in high school, or did you hate your time in high school? Did you have any good friends in high school, and why were they good friends? And did you know, talking about your past, you have so much past to go over, so much history to go over, and all of those things, I'm going to let you talk about this for a second, but all those things not only educate our spouse about who we are, but they have the opportunity of re-educating us as adults is about who we were.
And who we still might be.
Right.
Because sometimes there's a link between what we did when we were 5 or 7 or 10 or whatever and what we're doing now.
You know, what you thought about what you did when you were 17. When you were 17, doing the things you were doing at 17, you had an idea about that, right?
Right.
And you didn't think about it again until, you know, now you're 50.
Right.
And if I were to ask you questions about the things that you did and felt, you would remember them and think about them very differently now than the way you thought about them then.
Yes. Yeah, and now that I have kids that are grown, you know,
And 17 or older.
Yes, I can see, when I was my son's age, he's 21, I had a way of thinking that's not that dissimilar to his way of thinking. But now at 54, I think pretty differently, you know, about whatever the situation is, you know.
So not only can you talk about what you were like at 17 and things you did at 17, but you could have conversations about how your thinking has changed and why.
For sure. I mean, you know, my wife is also a therapist, and you can imagine our date night conversations, because often we'll talk about, you know, something that's come up, good or bad, doesn't matter what it is, and then we'll talk about the why of it. You know, like, how did you get to here?
Mm-hmm.
What does this mean to you? And those are really important moments for us. They're very emotionally close moments.
They're intimate moments where you're really working through your own thoughts out loud
and
with
having
somebody.
Someone who loves you and is not going to be critical, you know, reflective with you about what's going on in your own head. And that's just invaluable. I mean, to feel that level of safety and security in a relationship is incredible.
So start with, you know, we've said one thing, talk a little bit about your past. But I think there's also talk a little bit about what you hope for your future.
For sure. I mean, I think on so many levels, being able to think about what you want for your future. I mean, effectively, that's what all of our podcasts are about, right? About what it is that we're going to build with our lives. We have this opportunity as a team in our relationship to build something bigger than ourselves, something important, more important than what we would want individually. And to do that together and to be a part of a meaning-making system, you know, that we co-create. I mean, that's a huge opportunity. So, but on a smaller scale, there's something incredibly valuable about just saying, hey, what are we going to do for summer vacation next year? And let's dream about where we might go and what we might do, and think about how to involve the kids and, you know.
Or not.
Yes, you're correct. You know, being able to think even on a smaller scale, like, what do you want to do next week? Or what do you want to do on Saturday? And saying, well, I want to have a lazy day. I mean, these things are sort of itty-bitty dreams that we co-create together and then do together. And there's a certain kind of connection point that happens because
And they create this co-shared priority.
Yeah.
So let me just kind of wrap us up. I mean, those are two great things, talking about our past, talking about our future. But I just want to say to our listeners, if you're listening along and this sounds like a lot of work, you know, we do these podcasts every week. And every week we're going to give you something that you could take home and do together and work on to kind of keep this journey going.
And contemplate.
The weeks are going to roll by whether you're listening to us or not. The weeks are going to roll by whether you're doing this work or not.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the progress you can make over a year or two by having these types of quality conversations.
Yeah.
So, you know, do the work, dive in. The water's fine. It's going to be okay. So thanks a lot.
See you later.